I think we have started streaming, right? Okay. So hello everyone, welcome to the webinar Save Climate by 2030 in collaboration with the Warwick University, USA, where we talk about the different aspects of climate change and ways to combat it. Throughout the session, we will be talking about different initiatives across the country which helps to make a difference in the environmental world. My name is Bushra Noor, an undergrad student from the Department of Environmental Science and Management at North South University. I'm the host to today's webinar session, and tonight I'm here with some remarkable initiators, policymakers, negotiators, and environmental enthusiasts. Allow me to introduce the panelists here. First off, we have Shahrukh Zaman, a top climate negotiator, as well as a prestigious faculty member at North South University. Matt, welcome to this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Then we have Nabil Haq, former environmental advisor of GIZ, another prestigious faculty member at North South University. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Next, we have an alumni, the Queen's Award recipient, Sajid Iqbal Bhaiya. Thank you for tuning in, Bhaiya. Welcome to this platform.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And lastly, we have a student activist, Ajmain Adil Naqib. Welcome to this session, Bhaiya. Okay. Thank you for joining in with us today. Before we jump into some dynamical questions that we will be answering throughout the interactive session, I would actually like to go through some interesting stories with none other than Sajid Iqbal Bhaiya. Bhaiya, about your journey with Bottle Buddy. Like, I have read numerous amounts of articles on this, and everywhere I come across this one particular line that I come across in all of those articles is that you actually got interested into this concept or this invention through this one link that came across your Facebook feed, and that actually kind of caught. I'm pretty sure that caught everyone's attention. What made you so drawn towards this one concept that you went on and elaborated it and extended it to the slums of Bangladesh and went to door? So we would be very glad if you could share a few words on that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bushra, for the question, because with the Bottle Light initiative, our overall journey actually started. Can you hear me?
Not very clearly, Bhaiya.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better.
Sorry. So our overall journey towards climate mitigational process project started with Bottle Light project. It's a very simple idea. So I still remember I was a second year undergrad student at North South University in 2011-12. So that time, one of my same department friend shared a YouTube video of Philippines, where we have seen that they are using just water-filled plastic bottle to improve natural lighting in slum areas. And then I found this idea very innovative and very much relevant for Bangladesh as one of the most densely populated country, and because of climate change impacts and various other reasons, people are also migrating from rural areas to urban areas. So I saw that why don't we just simply improve natural lighting in different settlements and see how we can alternate electric bulbs and reduce significant amount of electricity usage, and simultaneously link up with carbon dioxide emission. Because as you know that if we can save per unit of our traditional electricity usages, and we can significantly reduce equivalent amount of electricity use and carbon dioxide emission. So that is how this idea came in our mind, and we tried to do something more than what we are studying in our classes. We tried to see how simple ideas can be linked up with this very complex dynamics of climate change, and how we can, being one of the most vulnerable countries, we always talk about climate adaptation processes and what fund and what resources we need from international arenas to adapt. But it's also important for us, I believe, that we need to focus on climate mitigation process as well. Otherwise, we can't reduce the process of climate change and reduce the impact accordingly. So yeah, that is how it started. We then further partnered with GIZ. Nabil Bhai was also that time advisor there. And with GIZ, we started focusing on to see how these simple ideas can have significant impact in overall our climate battle that I say that we are facing severe impacts and severe crises in different parts in different ways. So we try to see how significantly important this kind of low-tech technologies are for a developing country like Bangladesh and other neighboring countries. Onwards, we further expanded this bottle light concept, that how the natural light improvement initiatives from a particular slum area to different industrial areas, where in larger scale we improve natural lighting in industries to see in 10 to 12 hours how we can alternate our electrical bulb usage with simply natural lighting, and how economically these kind of projects are viable. So this how this project started with a very small course project, then ended up with a very sophisticated R&D research project with different development agencies, and further expanded in different parts. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for your valuable words. Paya, a few more questions. So, what were the practical words that were involved in the process of bottle batting? Like, how did you collect the plastic bottles and bring it together?
So yeah, we tried to focus on using reusable materials for natural light improvement initiatives in urban congested areas, not always in slum areas. Wherever we saw lack of natural lighting, we tried to improve the lighting condition with available material like bottle, a 2 liters plastic bottle. You can easily find in any informal sector recycling shops. You can buy it, or you can even collect the bottles from different users, like students from households. So we collected from different households. We tried to aware people about being respectful and responsible, utilizing different resources that are available to us because of our dire need of being sustainable and embed sustainability in our day-to-day life. And another reason we started Bottle Light project, particularly from a slum area, because we also tried to uh, we also tried to onboard some of the most vulnerable pupils of climate change, like in urban areas. So we tried to see how we can incorporate people who are very vulnerable group of climate change impacts, and how they can also play a significant role mitigating their carbon footprint. So this was one of the projects. So this way we outsource different plastic materials, even the reflective pipe that we use to accelerate the natural lighting in different settlements, that we also reused from different materials. So we always try to see the overall material life cycle of a particular material that we used for this individual project.
Understood. Thank you so much. And last question. I know I'm asking a lot of questions about this, but it is fairly and amazing and a very interesting project, and it definitely has helped millions. The last question that I want to ask you about this particular um, the processes that went on before. Um, what were your visionaries before you started? I know that you have it was before it went on an international level. It was a project of your own. Like you alone took the initiative from this link and you alone went to the slums and door to door explaining people why this is effective and why this is a better option. So what were your visionaries before you presented your model to South Asian Youth Society in 2012, which actually took it to the greater levels? So did you expect it to be something big when you started it, or was it like, okay, I'm going to benefit the people here, I'm going to benefit the people around me before taking it to the bigger level?
Yeah, definitely. So when we started this particular project, very frankly, I was not that planned to expand this project nationwide or conduct any in-depth study very significantly and scientifically. So we just saw the video. So that so if I just try to add that that time I was not alone. My friends and peers from the same department, my professors, I had friends living in different congested areas. They were very much enthusiastic.
I'm aware of Masum Bhaiya,
Yeah,
who actually helped you with
yeah. He's
electrical work or something.
yeah, yeah. Masum was there and Mamun was there. Mamun is also a very good friend of mine. That time he was a very professional electrician in a indoor stadium. I met him and a lot of community people when I was a fencing player. You know, the sword fighting player, sword fighting game. You wear a white dress. So we used to fence in Mirpur indoor stadium, and there I got an opportunity to meet with a lot of community peoples who particularly face severe lighting challenges even at daytime, because they didn't have sufficient passages through which the sunlight can get in. That was the ultimate challenge. And also they were up to use electric bulbs even at daytime, and they used to use transcant bulbs, very powerful bulbs, because those bulbs were very less costly. And so this is how we actually started working in different communities. We just saw the idea. I still remember that that time I had 8,000 taka to buy a mobile phone, but rather than buying a phone, we jumped up with this idea to see whether this light actually works or not. Because people were asking me why we need, even it was one of my questions, is why we need light at daytime. We have abundant sunlight. But the problem is, if you go to a congested household or in a slum area or an industry, you will see there is no passage or through which sunlight can get in. So we are opt to use electric bulbs even at daytime, and that's also significantly increasing carbon emission every minute, every hour, like thousands, millions households when we are utilizing electric bulbs. So that is how we started. Eventually, it became more association. Then it became a consulting firm. We started working with different uh, scientists and professors to further prove that we know we need natural light improvement initiative in Bangladesh, and particularly natural light improvement initiative is way economically sustainable than any other renewable sources, because we are just alternating natural light through a solution which in the long run can give you more return than any kind of renewable energy related in initiatives.
Um, since we have brought up the topic of how you were connected to so many friends who face such problems, do you think connecting with them like on a regular basis helped you to reach out to them and help them more intensively than it would have been if you weren't friends with them or connected with them?
Yeah, it's very important to be in touch with the community people, the community that where you want to make a difference, because otherwise you won't feel or you won't know the ultimate problem what they are facing, the basics of their understanding of interpreting a problem and a solution. So when I had friends from different congested areas, like, because in Dhaka, every one of us live in a congested area, but people who are living in uprised buildings, we are very much I must say, we are fortunate to have natural lighting through our windows, but people who are living in congested areas in single floor settlements, they don't have that place where sunlight can get in. So yeah, it's very important, because not only this particular bottle light project, after bottle light project we came up with different kind of projects. We worked with off-grid areas where people do not have access to electricity, so they were not interested on bottle light. They had more desire for light at daytime, and so we developed different low cost solar systems for them, because a lot of solar systems were available in the market, but they were still costly for them. So this is how we evolved from one idea to another idea, connecting different communities to solve different problems. And it's very important to get to know local people, to see their real life challenge and problem and come up with with a solution. So it could have been very different if I didn't have my friends in those particular urban settlements, and if I couldn't have that full access to work properly, communicate with people, to understand their challenge, to get proper feedback from them for further improvement of these particular devices. It's very important. And I just want to add just one point over here, that the bottle light that everyone saw, or everyone worked with a full plastic bottle. Now we are redesigning this bottle light in a shape where we will have more more light from this particular light devices, and also we will have less cost to install the lights in the upcoming days.
Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you so much for sharing such innovative ideas. Okay, so something that I have read about Sajid Paya's visionaries, rather, that he wants to expand it to the level that every household in Bangladesh has a bottle bati in their house. But even though it has expanded to a great level by the help of GIZ, so I want to ask Nabil sir, in fact, and get him involved and get his idea on how policies can be built so that this can be achieved, so that we can move to a greener tomorrow. In fact.
Okay, so let me catch that question again, if you don't mind.
What policies would you expect to be built, or would you suggest to bring this more greener initiative or a more greener option to every household in Bangladesh?
Okay.
Expand it further.
Okay, great question. Thank you. So it again depends on what are we trying to achieve with that policy. So if we are trying to just get to policy diffusion or technology diffusion, that is one way of that is one approach of going at it. And in our case, we often jump to that technology diffusion bandwagon without looking at all the innovation system factors, um, uh, which is where I think a lot of policy work can be done. So it doesn't have to be Motolbati. Okay? So it can be for environmentally sound technology. Okay, it can be for climate mitigation technology, for solar home systems, for cleaner production methods. Okay, so a lot of our policies actually tend to be overt. I would say that our policymakers have a high level of technology optimism, particularly with environmental concerns. Okay, that we adopt this technology, things it will clean the air. Okay, if we adopt ETPs, it will clean the water, and it only goes that far. Okay, it's just one part of the equation. Okay, we often forget about the scale, location, and all these other elements that are also, I would say, currently neglected, but are also important if we have to move into green homes. So again, success will be determined by what my policy goal is, and whether if you say that my policy goal is I want to see this technology in every household, that's a different way of putting things there. If you say that I really want this to work as a as a greener transition, as a sustainability transition, then your focus is completely different, and you have to address multiple aspects of things.
Thank you. So I can understand that there are various methods to address the situation. So, Shahrukh Zaman, I would like to get you involved into this as well. My question is, if after the policy is made, if the common people or the general people don't abide by it, or a community as a together don't abide by it, are there any steps that a lawyer will come into action at? Are there any proper steps to be taken then?
Thanks, Bush. This is, in fact, a very critical question, I have to say, because how the lawyer or how the legal aspect can extend their support in this regard. Policy is something that's the plan from the government. That's the plan which we, as a lawyer, state as a non-binding option, which state take for a long-term or short-term vision. But having said that, it's a plan, and there is no sanction or there is no bindingness on any sort of policy. That's why we call it policy, unless and until it turns out as a law. So in the policy matter, it's very difficult to bring the issues to the court if the policy is not properly implemented, if it is not properly adopted, or if the required action are not taken in accordance with the plan that is written in that policy. But of course, from the legal awareness perspective, we can create some sort of pressure to the governing body or to the institution so that eventually they can adopt it. But having said that, the weakest part here to have some policies is you cannot bring the issues to the court. You cannot impose some sanction there for not complying that policy.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss. Okay, going back to Nabil, sir. Sir, I have another question for you. Who are the stakeholders of resource policies?
It's actually a pretty broad question. In light with today's webinar topic, I would have to say everyone is, because it's if you're trying to solve climate change is a wicked problem. It touches on every economic activity. So in that sense, we all are stakeholders here. Okay, we all have a part to play. In terms of resource consumption, we do have certain policies and plans nationally where we have identified like what we actually want to do. And again, I want to take a tip at the organizer of the webinar, but it's, let me just say that the wording, I find it a little ambitious, and it's good for youth to have ambition. So the idea is that are we aiming for solving climate change, or are we aiming for stabilizing climate change? So that would because that's what the modeling is. We are aiming for that. Okay, that beyond 2 degrees, we don't know how the climate would react. Okay, so the targets and our models are saying that 1.5 is great, 2 is max. Beyond 2, we just don't know how this is going to go. Okay, so solve is a tricky word in that case. Nonetheless, with that said, we have different plans to, even as a emerging country, we have submitted our NDCs to the Paris Agreement, and so we have identified like what sectors uh, we are going to work on to, you know, make it more, um, to reduce our share of the this global burden. And over there, even though we have those sectoral plans, I would say it's now time for us to enhance that ambition, bring every sectors in, and over there, they're just all of us needs to work together here. Be it universities, be it think tanks, development partners, um, industry association, particularly. Um, we also need to get, you know, government agencies good at working with each other. Sometimes we struggle with that a lot in Bangladesh. So you know, uh, way too many institutions involved. Uh, this is also a difficult task bringing them all together.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think we should all agree that we all have an equal part to do in maintaining the policies and abiding by it. So going back to Sajid Bhaiya, since I think we're all aware of the mismanagement of waste in Bangladesh and how plastic has been one of the leading waste of that is filling up the lands and it's polluting the oceans and water bodies. So do you have any plans on using these the waste of Bangladesh or any sort or any part of the world where you're expanding this project? Do you have any plans on working with waste or waste management, involving waste management into this situation? I mean, into your project. Sorry.
So yeah, the natural light improvement initiatives are have some kind of linkage with less wastage and reusing few materials, but the plastic pollution problem became very critical, crucial, because a lot of people are working right now, but they started very late. If you remember in 2010, 2012, no one was talking about single-use plastic pollutions. But in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, the government banned it in 2004, 5 maybe, or even earlier, single-use plastic like polythene bags, and that significantly worked for several years because there was policy as Appa was sharing that we need to have policies, we need to have laws to support it. We have law, we have policies in for checking our pollutions, particularly waste and plastic pollution. But the problem is how we are going to enforce it and who are the key stakeholders who are influencing this enforcement policy. That's also very important to understand. So right now I'm in Canada, and Canada is really working hard to ban few single-use plastic usage. So they came up with, and because uh, like all of a sudden we cannot get rid of plastic usage because we are very much involved in a process where in every product we have plastic consumption in every part. But I strongly believe that when from individual part we will be aware, then we can have a significant impact on plastic pollution. Also we need a very good uh, working policy and enforcement mechanism, because if we don't have any policy or the enforcement agencies do not enforce the policy accordingly, we cannot get towards. So if you see from a perspective, as an individual, we have to be a part of this policy and this whole enforcement system. The government and policymakers have to make particular much needed policies, because with times we also need to change different and evolve with policy support mechanism, which is very much needed to go and reach to a different stage. So yeah, we are working on also awareing people through different campaigns to reduce their plastic consumption and plastic footage, so that ultimately we can reduce particularly plastic pollution, because in 2030 plastic is going to outrage the amount of fishes in seas. So this is very alarming. So plastic pollution, climate change, all these things all together creating a very complex, challenging times for us, where both of the issues are going to significantly impact our food safety, water security, going to impact our biodiversity. Then we have very less time to mitigate and face all these challenges altogether, I believe.
Thank you so much, Herb. Thank you so much for those words. Okay, I think we should read a few comments that we have gotten here. So, Raisa Bashar is really glad to see NSUSM and Earth Club have started these talks again. Also, a pleasure to hear from such distinguished speakers. And then all experts are in one frame. Good to see them together in one platform. I'm sure everyone's enjoying this. Okay, so now let's move towards a more a fresher idea. So I would like to talk to Ajmain Adil Nakib. Hiya, if you, I have a few questions for you. What draws you to policymaking, and what interests you to work in this field in the long run? We can't hear you. Is it only me? Can you all hear him? Hello?
I cannot also hear him.
Okay, then it's probably a problem from his side. I can't hear you. Yeah, I think we can hear you now. Hello? Sorry, we can't hear you. Can you,
I think am I audible now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I think there's some issue with my headphone. Really sorry for that. So, as per your question, I think this is a very common question to most of us ESM students that is being asked, which is in which sector you want to work in or what interests you the most. It's because our department itself is very inclusive. We had like teachers like Mizan sir who directly worked with policies, and then Shaban ma'am who is from a different department, but who she takes our environmental law course, and she tries to bring the perspective of a lawyer and the legal regime. And then there's also faculties like Shuja sir um, who is a who works with different materials. So, and most of our courses are not very discussed in detail. So this gives us a very vague idea of what we want to do in the future. But what made me interested in governance or policy making is that first of all, it has a lot to do with my participation in different extracurricular activities and participation in different thematic conferences. And also, it has a lot to do with with people who are present in this particular webinar, like Sharaban ma'am, Sajid bhai, Nadul sir, especially Sharaban ma'am. It and Mizan sir, and it has a lot to do with me taking their classes. Like Shaban ma'am used to discuss so much about the legal regime, how like the legal regime itself has a lot of influence on the climate governance and other environmental governance aspects. And also Mizan sir, who uh, I took his environmental ethics course, where he talked about how even religion and different social structures plays a very vital role in terms of environmental governance. So I think is the inspiration I got from the people I met throughout my around 3 years in this particular department. And also, it has a lot to do with the background I come from. I used to take part in different extracurricular activities where different students used to discuss about different governance issues and different policy issues. And it also has a lot to do with the opportunities NSU exposed me to. For example, in the beginning of this year, I went to Sirpur for 35 days, and it gave me a very broad aspect of waste management, because I went there for a project that is supervised by our very own Zakaria sir. So he exposed me to a very different field, because I'm not someone who's very used to staying in fields for a very long time. It was for 35 days, but that experience itself exposed me to a very different reality, a reality students like me were never exposed to. And these experiences at times make me glad that I changed my department. In my first year in NSU, I was a BBA student. I used to my plan was to major in marketing, but it swiftly shifted to this department because I took a course with Hanu Maria ma'am. She is the student advisor of this particular club, Earth Club. So she brought a very interdisciplinary aspect in the introduction to environmental science course. So that made me understand how much can be done in this particular aspect in our country, and how even the youth can play a role or take part in terms of environmental sustainability, and how even different SDGs are interrelated to SDGs like climate action, even safe water and sanitation, how these are all interrelated. So I think it has a lot to do with the people I have came across, and also the experience I was exposed to by itself.
Thank you so much.
I hope I was audible.
Yes, you were. You were perfectly audible. Okay. Another question that I have for you is, what are the problems you expect to face while you're, while you enter into this realm?
Yes. As I'm still a student, and especially students who are not very much exposed to the governance or policy making arena, because especially in our country, we do not have that many opportunities for undergrad students in this aspect. But at the same time, I think what Sharban ma'am has mentioned, how what should I say, the legislative complexity that our country has, and how the governance system of Bangladesh has. And it has a lot to, probably I might or might not face different barriers regarding it, because the governance system or the whole system itself of Bangladesh is not very inclusive, or is not very friendly towards people from every background, or people who have different mindsets. So I think I might face issues with that. But God knows what might come in our way. This is something I'm not even sure of. I think the experts were probably in the other side of the table. They might have a very more profound aspect or knowledge regarding what I might face, like Sharban ma'am or Nabil sir, as they have both worked with policy and they work with policy analysis. But at the same time, I think I personally think there's a particular set of barrier I might, because I work with very remote people. There's something I feel very interested in working with remote people, because you are exposed to a very different reality. People who do not have the privileges we have, people who at times do not speak the languages we probably Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, Priya.
Can I add
No,
something
I think there was an internet issue.
regarding policy making
Yes.
process and
So
this?
yes, there's something I feel that I might face an issue regarding, which is
Um,
connecting with these
Ajman
people
Bhaiya?
from.
Sajid is trying to add
Yes.
something to the policy making sector.
So yeah, I just want to add few things with Adil because I think it's very important to be because we all of were in different times in our life we're students and always we think that we can be a part of the policy making process or policy is something for only for the lawyers or policy is something that you need to be privileged to have influence but absolutely I think it's not the way we think it's a part because uh, so what is policy? Policy is actually nothing but government or authority bodies guideline that how we will take initiatives, how we will work with different resources, how we will work with stakeholders, how the enforcement agencies will work, and how all together we can get to a place where we are trying to solve the problem. So this is policy and how this whole mechanism works. So being a student, definitely being a student, being a young advocate, young change maker, a senior leader, scientist, everyone can be a part of the policy. Let me just give you few examples about our natural light improvement initiatives. Because when we started our project, no one was thinking about improving natural lighting in different settlements in Bangladesh because they were asking about why we need light at daytime, the same question that is not going to work. So what we did, we worked with development agencies, BUET, North South University to see that how bottle light, different industrial skylights and these activities work as a solution, how impactful these projects can be. So we worked 2 to 3 years establishing the idea and scientifically proved that no, it's important. Through GIZ, these findings further be presented to SREDA. SREDA is a regulatory body of the government who is promoting renewable energy and efficiency improvement projects with GIZ, different development agencies and others. So this is how one particular very small uh, university project came to limelight in government that no, by improving natural lighting rather than installing only LED lights, solar panels, if we also incorporate this such solution can have significant benefit for the government as well as for the international arena to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions as well as to significantly uh, improve our electricity misuse. So this is how it went to SREDA. From SREDA, we presented the findings and the importance to the Honorable State Minister of Energy as well, that why we need to further need some policy support from them to popularize this idea across the nation and what benefit we can get out of it. We talked with the then secretary, energy secretary, about the potentialities, and it takes time. So in one go, you can't have significant influence in the community, but if you see from our part from last 5 years what policy influence that we had through this particular bottle light or industrial skylight pilot projects, I will say that after that they incorporated in different public engagements the importance of this natural lighting. We finished our R&D project, but BUET and students studying there, they have took the initiative. They're doing more research in it, how they can also improve its efficiency, how they can expand different in different parts of Bangladesh. People are working with similar projects in by their own to expand in different settlements. So this is how you can see that a concept can be well established in our community through facts and figures and processes. This is how you can also narrate your and have influence in policy making process to popularize and to significantly gather other stakeholders and supporters within your capacity. Thank you. And one last thing, I have another question for Nabil Bhai, because he has been working with a lot of CDM projects and different policies regarding CDM projects. So Nabil Bhai, uh, being one of the most vulnerable country, what do you think? Like, from my own perspective, we haven't seen a lot of CDM projects were happening in Bangladesh. Now we are also in the end of the whole CDM project, but China and other places, they did like more than hundreds of projects. So what were our key uh, lackings, like from different areas institutionally, why we were not, whether we were capable or not capable to lead such projects, or we were lacking severely policy guidelines or supports to further utilize these international resources to create our capacity. Yeah. And I have another question for Tahura Appa and also Adil, if Bushra allows me to ask. Yeah, and time permits later. Yeah, Nabil bhai.
Of course, Bhai, of course. No problem at all.
Bushra, do I answer that now or?
Yes, sir. Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Sajid. Great question, actually. So CDM, for CDM, I would say it's a little bit about weakness. We definitely had part of that, but our DOE, what we called designated operational entity here, or national authority, DNA. Sorry, DNA, which is served by the DOE right now, is pretty active on it. We have a very effective resource person, Mirza Shaukat, who is very active on that front. I would say the lacking for our CDM participation mainly is because of high transaction cost. To register a CDM project, you have to go through a lot of these validation, verification process. So I worked on this issue 10 years ago. Okay, so maybe things have changed. I have to check on that. 10 years ago, there were no local entities who did this validation. So those who would do this verification validation, those are UNFCCC registered entities, and they for our case, when I worked on that one project on promoting cleaner technology in the brick sector, we had to source an Indian audit company to do that validation. And it involves huge cost, So we did a bundle project, means 8 different entities got together, and we tried to develop that as a bundle project. But it has high cost, and the other factor where CDM sort of lost steam at some point. Okay, and it was difficult for me to sell it as well. With CDM, you end up with certified emission reductions. These are the certificates, basically, of that emission that you didn't put out in the atmosphere. That saving certificate is called CER, certified emission reduction, and that price is varied at certain point. In say 2010-11, because the market was Europe, and Europe was going through a recession. Nobody at that time wanted to source these emission reduction certificates from other countries. Okay, so because they had a slowdown in their economy, they could reach their own targeted reduction by themselves in their own economy, so they didn't need to actually source it. So at some point, even the price or the value for these certified emission reduction was just 20 euro cents. So that really doesn't add much incentives. Okay, some other times when it got started, it was 20 euros. So that if per ton of CO2 emission reduction is selling at like 20 euros, that's a really important, that adds to your revenue stream. So some key reason I would say is like transaction cost, that you have to source these third-party auditors. There were none in Bangladesh. I have to check whether they, any have developed that capacity or got registered as a auditor in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, there were none. So you had to source these auditors from somewhere else. It's a huge cost. Registration is also a huge effect. And on the flip side, so those people who want to participate in a CDM, say, if I have a factory and I want to do some energy efficiency measures and I want to sell this as a CDM project, and the amount of paperwork or the amount of monitoring that you have to do, we actually there is actually a lacking within that factory sense or within that individual sense of what are we monitoring? Why is this important? Where are the leakages? There is some capacity gaps. Okay? So we again, we try to do it for brick kilns. There's a serious gaps. Okay, so the fire masters and the they care about getting the product out. So monitoring coal usage, like how do you measure coals, buckets and everything. So we came out with all that sort of problems. Some industries are like better, has better skills, the personnel, factory personnel. So it may be easier for them. So definitely, lack of skills at this field level was also a problem. Like proper bookkeeping about emissions or resource usage. Those are very important for getting CDM registered.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Now we have some questions for Shahrukh and Miss. Before we get to that, I would like to present a video to everyone. So allow me to present the video, and then we will go to answering the questions addressed towards Shahrukh and Miss. Sorry about that. Give me a minute. Can you guys see the screen? Hello.
Welcome to the Solve Climate Global Dialogues. You're participating in one of 125 events held across the planet, including in almost all 50 US states, part of a global project called Solve Climate by 2030. My name is Eben Goodstein, and I'm an economist and director of the Graduate Programs in Sustainability at Bard College in New York, the lead organizer for Solve Climate. This last year has been difficult for everyone. As the world looks forward to recovery from COVID, we are focusing tonight on the most important question facing humanity. What can we do in this year in our regions to help solve climate change while supporting struggling communities that have faced widespread loss of life, economic disaster, and joblessness? Worldwide, from Australia to Kyrgyzstan, from Colombia to Malaysia, and from South Carolina to South Africa, Solve Climate audiences are hearing from local experts and young leaders about concrete steps that can really help nations solve climate change while creating much needed jobs and incomes for everybody. The year 2020 was one of the 2 hottest years in human history, bringing with it massive forest and grassland fires, record-breaking storms and hurricanes, and relentless rising seas. Solving climate is the challenge which the human species must now face. There's hope for the future. Solutions have continued to advance. This year, China committed to building a carbon neutral economy, while the US rejoined the Paris Agreement. Solar, wind, and battery prices continue to fall, while major car companies have been rushing to electrify the global fleet. Worldwide, movements for Black Lives Matter and Me Too are leading in bringing much delayed and urgently needed justice to the world. Time is short. We have until 2030, 10 years to solve climate. We can get a lot done in this decade. We have the solutions, but only if we focus the world on climate solutions and justice, and then do the work we have to do in our own cities and regions. For students listening, you are the leaders. Without you, the future we envision will not come. I'm asking tonight for your help. We're going to discover powerful ideas for climate solutions and climate justice and how you can be a part of the solution. But this message must reach beyond those of us who are listening right now. Would you ask all your teachers this week in every subject to make climate a class? The teacher can assign tonight's webinar's homework for the students and then afterwards have a one-class period discussion. And we mean every subject, from art to engineering, psychology to business, dance to chemistry. Teachers don't need to be a climate expert to lead a discussion about climate change. The Solve Climate Project has easy-to-use teacher's guides in nearly every subject and in 3 languages to help teachers make climate relevant to their class. It only takes courage. Don't take no for an answer. Ask them, why not? This is your future. You'll be surprised how many teachers will say yes and thank you. Imagine you, thousands of leaders like you around the world asking their teachers once every school term to make climate a class. That means every term going forwards, hundreds of thousands, millions of students worldwide in their classes talking about climate solutions. COVID has shown how fragile our global economy and society are to extreme events. It's also shown that vulnerable people are facing the hardest, most damaging impacts. This is also true with climate change. Science has made it clear that unchecked, global warming will mean an unending onslaught of extreme events, causing untold suffering for humanity and all creatures, species driven to extinction, a planet of environmental refugees. And yet, in many ways, this is the most exciting time to ever be alive as a human. We have the tools and networks and technologies to rewire the world with clean energy, reimagine the global food system, reinvent transportation, and regenerate forests and grasslands, and be well on our way to solving climate by 2030. Tonight, we will learn how to do this in our own cities, our own towns, our own regions. Thank you for the work you will do to promote climate solutions and a just world.
I think that video itself was a very strong message for everyone, not just us environmentalists, but also all students, like students from all sectors should get involved into this and bring a proper and positive change to the climate. So anyone has any words to share on this video before we go to Shahrukh Miss? I guess not, that was clear enough. So let's move on to the question that was addressed towards Shahrukh Miss. Okay, it was by Mehdavi Matra. Question to Shahrukh ma'am and Nabil sir. We are all aware of many, wait, let me share this. We were all aware of many local small-scale environmental ventures that are all about sustainability, climate action, examples like converting plastics to usable fuels, Sonali bags that's mentioned by another commenter. What are the limitations in law and policy making to accommodate these on a national scale, even when we know that their success will only be beneficial for the country? What do you have to say on that then?
Okay, should I start or I can leave it to Dr. Nabil?
No, please, ma'am, please.
Okay, thank you so much. So that's a very interesting question. As I always said in my class, from the Bangladesh context, we have a very strong and very dynamic and unique legal system, especially that address environmental issues. as Sajid Bhai also mentioned, we do have laws to address the plastic-related pollution, to address the hazardous waste management, and also to reduce the single-use plastic. Last year, we had a judgment from our Supreme Court that in the seashore area, we cannot use, or it's totally banned to use the single-use plastic. Well, the law is there, but still we got to see there are lots of pollutions are around. Why? That's the lack of enforcement mechanism. It's not like that we don't have a institution or governance body to enforce those laws. The problem lies is sometimes we try to say it as a less of focus. For instance, if we think about the year 2001, I believe many of the participants at that time was very young. In 2001, we first adopted the official gazette notification that completely banned plastic bag, especially thonga. And that was perfectly all right for next 5 years. And we got to see, we started to use all the alternative that actually can replace plastic bags or thonga, because that was the focus or concentration area from the government side. Later on, somehow it lose the focus, and we now got to see our market is now flooded with all these single-use plastic bags and all the thonga that is completely prohibited under our laws. So from my perspective, we have a fantastic law. We do have an institution. The problem lies is lack of intention to enforce this law. And also, the key governing authority is DOE, Department of Environment, especially to address these issues. We have to address that, though it's been 25 years, the DOE started its journey, but still it has logistic crisis. Why? The answer is not very clear, that already 25 years passed, but still DOE is struggling with the logistic support. But the problem is still there. So my answer in this question is the loss is there, the institutional framework is there. We need to make it more stronger so that we can secure a more effective enforcement mechanism so that the law can become more functional. So that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Yes.
I completely agree with Shravan ma'am that we just lost steam. Okay, we had a good start very early. If you see, if you do a comparison of which country adopted this ban, we were in the early stages. Like we did this ban many years ago. Okay, and then we just lost the race. Okay, and just following up with DOE, it has a lot of mandate, and it has very restricted support. Okay, I did this consulting work last year. I think there was this in the country environmental analysis that World Bank published. It was given like that the DOE still does not have 775 posts. That is there, but these positions are vacant. Okay, so they cannot exactly hire for those positions. It is a political will, and all good governance and all those aspects. But had those people been there, had we had a stronger enforcement mechanism for that, maybe things would have been different. I do see there's now a new movement, and I see a lot of like Facebook videos on a very crude way of converting plastic into fuel. I have to say that technically it is done in many countries. Okay, we have to do a little more research on it, whether it's like feasible in the sense of like cost effectiveness format. At some point, we need to upscale these technologies, and there again, for technologies to pick up, and that involves our Sonali bag as well. Just the intention and the awareness, that's just one aspect of it. So it's actually a different discipline where I briefly touched upon it in my own PhD dissertation work. For technology to really pick up speed in terms of its adoption and diffusion, there are certain innovation system factors that that plays a role into it. So knowledge development and knowledge diffusion is just two aspects of them. There are 5 other functions that need to work together to really get a technology to upscale. So yeah, that's what I had.
Thank you, sir. Before we go to Sajid Paya's question directed towards Shahrukh and Miss, I have a few more questions for you. I hope Sajid Paya is fine with waiting for a little more while. Okay. All right.
Yeah, sure,
So, okay, thank you, Paya. So, Shahrukh and Miss, about your experience at the COP. So, what were the disappointments or the failings that you had to face while negotiating for COP?
Okay, COP process it's a very technical process from 2 contexts, because COP it's a huge event. Lots of activities goes on, but the key things that actually take place is the negotiation to make further rules and regulation in this climate change process. I was involved in this process from 2012, and then from 2017 I started my negotiation, especially on the issue of mitigation and compliance. Because as I mentioned earlier, policy cannot be effective unless and until there is a sanction. And once there is a sanction, it becomes law. We cannot no longer consider it as a policy. And having an international law, especially from the climate change context, is extremely important, because end of the day, you need to mitigate. And to reducing the emission, it's not very easy. All countries want to be more economically stronger. So no country will be convinced to reduce your emission and unless and until you make it economically viable or there is some legal option or sanction on that. So in 2017, when I started my journey, initially I thought my hurdle will be mostly for the developed countries, like all those annex countries who we consider them as a main responsible countries for this climate change or this global warming problem. But now the scenario got changed. Now other developing countries are in the front line, like China, India, who are similarly adopting the dirty development path like developed country did. And now they are become the major barrier for us, because they really don't want to have any kind of obligation or any kind of bindingness in the emission reduction process. Even as my main negotiation areas NDC and its 5-year time frame, believe me, for last 4 years we are struggling just to have a time frame, no target, no commitment, no progressive action, just a time frame, just to submit your time frame in each 5 years. What is the result? In Madrid, which was the last COP, COP25, Article 17 was imposed. All the negotiation just wiped out. Why? Because developing country don't want to have a time frame. So forget about the target and all the promises that you are going to adopt under this process. You are not even convinced to take a simple 5 years or an aggregate time frame which will followed by all other countries. So lots of frustrations are there, because climate change whole process, the regime is almost 31 years old now, and no much progress is actually happening here. It started with UNFCCC, and then we adopted Kyoto Protocol. When I started my attending process, at that time Kyoto was dying, and then we all started to give our best effort for Paris Agreement. To be very honest, many expert negotiators tend to see Paris Agreement is also dying, because 25th COP, that happened in Madrid, that was a complete failure. COP26, yesterday we had a meeting because we supposed to have Substa in this month. Substa got postponed. It's very unlikely that COP26 is going to happen in this year. We already, we already missed 1 year, which was COP25. And then due to pandemic, we already missed another year. And there is a high possibility that this year COP is not going to take place. And if this is the situation, as in the video mentioned, we have only 10 years. That is our red zone. We cannot cross 2030 without having a very clear pathways related with emission. If we can't have this pathway by now, by 2030, emission will be reached up to 30 degree. And as we know, even 2 degree temperature is alarm for us like developing country and small island country. We always seek for 1.5. Even beyond 1.5 is a clear red zone for us. So from my perspective, from my negotiation frustration perspective, from the mitigation context, negotiation is not moving. I always mention to my student, you need to be very aware that's what is happening in the future. If we cannot make the mitigation in reality, after 2025, nothing effective can take place. Even science, technology can't help us in this regard much unless and until state agree on these issues. So I don't see much hope. As I said, like many senior negotiator also started to feel frustrated that nothing much might be able to achieve through mitigation process under the Paris Agreement. But young generation, young people, we really need to be aware that where we are landing now and what is our future.
Yes, that sounds like a very frustrating and rather long process. And that reminds me of a line that you have mentioned in this article you wrote for Daily Star, titled as International Green Court, the Solution to Achieving Climate Justice. I think that was a very, very interesting concept and a rather very interesting article. So I want to quote a line that you have written there. However, the existing climate regulatory regime built upon 27 years of negotiations has already proven woefully inadequate. My question is, on what basis have you narrowed down to this conclusion, and what do you expect the future to be if we keep on walking on the same trail?
Okay, so if I make a very fair judgment here, from the Paris Agreement, because that is the legally binding instrument right now we have in our hand, because by 2020 Kyoto Protocol got expired. Maybe that is also the reason why CDM is also not actually forwarding much, because CDM anchoring platform that was Kyoto Protocol, and Kyoto got expired by 2020. So we are not very sure that how CDM be anchored under the Paris Agreement under Article 6. Regarding this Green Code, this is also a movement that is happening throughout the world, because international agreement as Kyoto Protocol or Paris Agreement, it's very difficult to make a state compel to adopt their target or to make their work done. And also, Paris Agreement don't open any scope for litigation or to bring the states to the court. But does it mean that state will never be able to come before the court to answer what the wrong they are doing? Of course, they can do that, because we have ICJ, International Court of Justice, and many global environmental problems we sorted out through the judgment of ICJ. So, Green Climate Court is also a thought, which is it's a very preliminary stage thoughts, because legal experts and also the people who are involved in the negotiation, they believe like under the Paris Agreement, there is a very least hope that through this process, we can make the state liable or compel to adopt and in practice to implement all their mitigation action at the very ground level. So in that case, Green Climate Court, just like ICJ, International Court of Justice, can take the action and can bring the state before the court and can address the issues, that what is the problem, why they are not actually implementing or taking the action as they are promised for. In that regard, we do have a very good example like Netherlands case. Recently, the decision that came out in US, in one of the court of the US and also in Pakistan, where court asked the state why they are not taking adequate action for the climate, to address the climate mitigation issues. So as the current tools are not working properly, so green climate code might give some solution, but lots of work needs to be done here, because ICJ is functioning from a very different context. Same model we need to develop here, and again, it all takes time. Now here again lies the question, do we have that time? Because time is ticking, we don't have much time actually. So we need to make immediate action, effective action, actually, to make the things actually move. Right now nothing is actually moving.
Talking about effective actions, you actually end up the article with a sentence establishing an international court will require more support. Therefore, let's start considering how to turn it into a reality in the interest of future generations. So, how do you plan to turn this into a matter of interest for the future generations? Also, like you have mentioned, we do not have enough time. I mean, 10 years of time is actually very low. So, how do you plan to actually bring this into action, or is this even possible?
One possible action that we currently, many people are thinking, which actually I think Greta Thunberg's movement related on climate action issues is one of the considered way forward in this regard, where we are thinking about establishing national court, and also making functional the highest judiciary in each court, and make the highest judiciary empowered to question the state, so that state can remain answerable. Because state is, to be very honest, every sovereign state is only answerable to its court, not even to the international forum. So in that case, the Supreme Judiciary, for instance, in Bangladesh Appellate Division, as I said, like in Netherlands Supreme Court took that lead. So following the Netherlands example, we can do the same thing in Bangladesh. We can make the judiciary functional, and make the state answerable to the judiciary, that why they are not taking adequate action. Though there are challenges as well, like in USA, uh, uh, young generation, they filed a case. I think, if I'm not very wrong, in 2018 they filed the case, and the court set aside it, because they said like it happened, the emission and all the industrial development took place in 100 years back, and at that time we were not aware on climate change issues. So these things cannot be addressed. But now we are in a time, for instance, countries like Bangladesh, China, India, who are the most emitter countries, they cannot say the same things, because we started our development in last 30 years, and the dirty development path that we are currently adopting, we are adopting it knowingly. There is nothing unknowing here. So in that case, the national court aligning with an international institution might be helpful in this regard, where even the future generation or the current generation, as I mentioned, Greta Thunberg's campaign is very much strongly linked up with this. So you can proceed it further through the judicial body.
Thank you so much, Miss. Thank you so much for your valuable words. And definitely that article on International Green Court that works on with the mechanism of compulsory jurisdiction was rather very interesting. And I couldn't help myself but to ask the questions for my interest. So now let's move on to Sajid Bhaiya. Sajid Bhaiya, you had a few questions to ask Shahraban Miss and Nabil Haq and Ajman, I believe.
Yeah, Sarban Appa already answered pretty much all my questions, coincidentally. So yeah, Nabil Bhai also very boldly discussed about the CDM challenges that we faced, and how we can take it as a learning journey to further incorporate in our COP meetings this kind of procedure and for greater impact. So yeah, I have some generic questions. It's not the question that needs to be answered right now, but something we need to think from our individual perspective, and something we need to work all together. Even the students of our department and university can also advocate further to push government to adopt few of the things. So my first question is, like, as Mizan sir was always sharing with us, that why we don't have BCS cadre in government from environment and climate change sectors. So why it's taking time, or it's a very specialized and topic where environmentalists have to work with a diverse group of people. So why don't we have BCS cadres for particularly environment? This is one issue. And Nabil Bhai was saying that DOE has a lot of positions that are not been filled. So where's the gap? Why? So this is something we need to ask regularly to our ministers and secretaries, that why you are not adapting this. And the students can do it really well, participating in different programs, conferences, asking the same question day by day, so that sometimes they will get aware. And asking a right question to the right people to a right place can also significantly influence the whole policymaking process. This is one observation that I had to share with every one of you, the participants who are listening to us. Number two question is, why we are not thinking about having curriculum change and incorporating environment and climate change related studies in our primary and secondary level education as a subject. A lot of countries have recently adopted and made mandatory environmental studies in their curriculum. Even India, a lot of different provinces in India, they have adopted these things. So what we can do and how we can advocate these things, because 350 org and is advocating how to make complement, because we all need to be aware, we all need to be educated from very early age, so that we can have behavioral change towards environment and sustainability. So my question is to Adil, that how we can mobilize young people to further discuss with our education ministers and environment ministers to influence, to incorporate and make mandatory very simple things in our education system, which can have significant impact on environment aspect. Another thing is, I want to share that Biden government recently came into power, which is very optimistic for us, because as you know that in Trump government times, they just read out US from Paris Agreement, and then Biden again came back. And very recently, this April 22nd and 23rd, Biden arranged a high panel world leader summit on climate change, which is going to be happened in US. So he invited 40 world leaders, and our honorable prime minister is also a part of this. So these are some significant aspects that different countries are taking before the COP26. As Sarbanapa was saying, that we are already late due to COVID and all other situations. So this is also very important to see how we can put our message, what we need in policymaking process, to these world leaders in particular times, to influence legislations and activities, is also important to think and to act accordingly. So yeah, thank you. So if anybody wants to add few things regarding these particular three topics, please feel free to add or give you valuable judgment.
Shahrukh, do you want to answer that?
First of all, if I address the first question, that why do you don't have this cadre? I think DOE is an institution under the Ministry of Environment, and Ministry of Environment do have the BCS cadre within their official organogram. But DOE is a very technical institution. In this technical institution, you need a scientist, you need a surveyor, you need a lab expert, and that technical expertise might not come out through the BCS selection process. So that's why they always make an open call, where which is open for all the peoples who have that technical know-how. Regarding the curriculum issues, I think this is a very fantastic idea, and also this is what we very, very needed. If I say it from the international negotiation perspective, it's pretty much now obvious that 30 years already passed, and least hope actually left that state will actually come forward to make a significant difference. In that case, we actually need to make the difference by ourselves with our own action. And how? A curriculum at the very junior or primary level can make the student more aware. That's what is happening related with the climate, what is happening with the global temperature and all that. And by self-awareness, we can make some positive changes. But again, this takes time. So for me, time is a huge challenge here. So this question, I cannot actually, I don't know what to answer on this, the time management issues, because by 2030, if we cannot make a significant difference, we cannot go for 2050 net zero emission. That's very clear-cut answer. So time is a huge challenge here, but self-awareness is important, because even if we see the regime of Trump, even though at that time he actually pulled out USA from the Paris Agreement, but the reality was due to the so much civil society pressure, and also the pressure from the various young people or young group like Greta, many state actions or even many individual states took reasonably and fairly initiative which help them to move for renewable energy, or at least to reduce the pollution from dirty emission. So curriculum from the primary level can be a very good way forward, and self-awareness is the bottom solution that I see in this whole process. If state cannot do anything, it is we only that we can make some good difference. So instead of looking at what the state are doing, I think this is the right time for us to think about what we are actually doing, and based on that, we can try for a positive change.
Before we move to the questions that we have been asked in the comment section, Ajmain and Nabil sir, do you guys have anything to add to that?
Busha, if I may, if Nabil sir wants to go first, I don't mind.
No, I want you to go.
So should I go first?
Yes. Please do.
Okay. So as Sajid Bhai has mentioned about how we need to be very inclusive regarding our environmental studies, especially in the secondary school. This is something I had faced while I was teaching my younger sister. In most of the cases, in the books they read, it said Moala Filbana, Eta Kurbana, Mane, like in the section of environmental studies, which is like explained very briefly. You should not be doing this to preserve the environment. You should be doing this to preserve the environment. But it does not necessarily mention why they should be doing this. Sajid has mentioned how plastic pollution itself like destroys biodiversity in so many ways, and then and climate change, how climate change is a food security issue and also a water security issue. But these things are like, I understand these are they're just children, and probably that is one of the reasons it's explained very briefly, but the same, or not explained at all. But at the same time, when I was teaching my sister about how these things work, even there are times she does not even as our education system itself is very memorizing based, and they almost do not never have the platform to ask questions, especially in this in the midst of this pandemic. So I think this is very important that we give the youngsters of today the platform to actually ask the question, why this is happening, why climate change is important, why preserving water is very important. For example, my father he himself is, works at Dhaka Water. He's a civil engineer. So when I was a child of probably 14 or 15 years old, I used to see him going in the field and talking to different stakeholders. But I used to see how people from very remote areas, even in Dhaka, they used to come forward and ask, why aren't they getting proper why they are not getting clean and safe water, whereas they pay their taxes and everything. They follow all the laws they're supposed to. I mean, when I was a child, these things did not rise in my mind, because obviously these things are not mentioned in our book. And as children of Bangladesh, and especially in this subcontinent, we're not given that much scope to ask questions why we should be doing this and how it would impact our lives. But I'm very glad that nowadays, even ma'am talked about Greta, how she has created a whole movement. And even in Bangladesh, I have seen so many of my friends, they're very much aware about how climate change is impacting them. There is hope, but at the same time, I think it would be better if the youngsters, or the ones who are younger than us, or the next generation of students, if they're given the proper platform to ask questions like why should we do this and how it would impact us, I think that would be very revolutionary for the future generation, including us.
Nabil, sir, do you have anything to add to that?
Again, much has been said on the education part, so I'll just skip that. Just an addition, maybe with Ms. Sharwin here, that yes, about the DOE's recruitment process, but DOE also sort of sometimes does not go for enforcement because they lack magistrates in every sort of areas. So sometimes they, that is also an area where perhaps we need to, I would say we need to rethink that system. That they often sometimes don't go for enforcement because they're waiting for the magistrate to arrive from Dhaka. Some places in this that has been in the news recently as well. So maybe we have technical people, we recruit technical people, but just because they don't have their in-house magistrate at that district office or the divisional office, and they have to wait for someone to come to that. Perhaps the system needs a little rethinking on that front. So that's my idea, but she might be better able to comment on that.
Okay, I would love to comment on that. Here lies another challenge actually. When we go for action, I often tell my students that when we go for operation, for instance, whether the industries are operating their ETP or not, whether they are complying with the waste management decision or not, it's not only the magistrate that you need, you also need police force. So in that case, actually, this whole mechanism comes under the Home Ministry. That's why in 2017, under the Mobile Court Act, we gave the authority of this enforcement mechanism to the mobile court that actually run by the Home Ministry with the support of police force and everything. So here actually the problem lies not within the DOE's capacity. Here is, we often say it's a kind of cross-cutting things where ministries and other enforcing agencies has a very cross-cutting interest and capacity. So even in many situations, I had the opportunity to see DOE wanted to go for operation, but magistrate cannot because there is not enough police force to run that operation. Maybe they want to go for a operation in Gazipur, and Gazipur police force is right now busy to providing some VIP protocols, and that's why they cannot go for this pollution related enforcement mechanism. So this is again something, as I mentioned earlier, political will is a very significant thing, and also logistic support. And in many situations, due is failure to act properly or adequately, actually hampered by this bureaucratic problem, as I mentioned right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. To you, Miss Shahraban, Miss Ajman Paya, and Nabil sir as well. And thank you so much, Sajid Paya, for asking this wonderful question. So, since we are almost at the end of this session, we should actually go through the questions and just try to answer them briefly, as there is quite a few of them. So, starting off, I would like to address the question done by Niloufar Rizwani. Climate differs from country to country. Will it be possible to make policies as per our requirements? I know we need fund. Why don't we use our local resources rather not waiting for the foreigner investors? So, who would like to answer that? Yes.
I think, yeah, sorry. I think there is a sort of a tendency like that. Again, we should. Sometimes, I myself worked in a policy matter once, so in a different capacity. Okay, and then as an academic, I critique that part, that it's actually a non-state involvement in a policy cycle of a country. It doesn't look very good. I can say that now as an academic. Um, but sometimes our tendency is that external sources will come to our aid, particularly solving our inner problems with regards to environment. I look at it with pity, honesty. So the regulation that I worked in myself, in my own capacity at GIZ, was sludge management. We didn't exactly know before 2015 what to do with ETP residual, wastewater treatment residual sludge. That only got done in 2015 with GIZ support. Again, we waited, but technically it should have been taken care after environment conservation rules got passed. So we waited almost 20 years for some donor agency to look at it. Okay, right now we are doing a lot of, we were looking at a donor consortium working on water issues, just because of the simple fact that we couldn't price our groundwater till date. Okay, and that's why we are facing a lot of problems, particularly in some industrial belts where water is practically free. Okay, your only cost is your the energy that you put in to extract groundwater. So yes, unfortunately, we have that capacity. We use our internal expertise as well during the policy development process, but sometimes that nudge comes through development agencies, and which I find very unfortunate. But thank you for raising this point.
Thank you, sir. I think Sajid Paya has something to add to that.
No, I just want to add that, yeah, definitely all governments and partners locally needs to invest, and that people are doing. Like Bangladesh government already created their climate change trust. They have their own budgets from their, so significantly they are trying to do. But as Nabil Bhai said, that environmental and climate change issues are not only local problem, it's a global problem, and we need to address in a holistic global economical instrument. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So if I just focus on sustainable development goals and the budget that we need every year, it's around $4 to $5 trillion for the developing countries. But unfortunately, over the last couple of years, every year there was more than half of its deficit. Like the developed countries were committed, but they were not. They were not committed. They said they will arrange this money, but they were not doing their part. So this is how everything gets a lot of time, and throughout this one and more than 1 year's COVID journey. So achieving SDGs by 2030 became more difficult, and it surpassed the whole need of global budget to 4.5 to 6 or 7 trillion dollars a year, but how these funds are accumulating accordingly, it's also very important. So locally people are doing a lot of private sector entities are doing, but it's very important that we work holistically. Yeah.
Thank you, Paya. Okay. I hope the answer was clear enough. Okay, moving on to the next question by Ahmed Hussein. When it comes a phenomena that has been engraved over since the Industrial Revolution, enhanced further by certain mentalities in our country, can we really play by the books, or should drastic measures be taken by the government or any environmental body regarding climate change in the country? Which concept, economic, political, social, can bring the fastest change to a greener country? I think, Sajid Bhai, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, definitely. It needs to come from all sectors. It needs to come from all stakeholders, because only government can't solve a problem. For example, let me give not a climate change issue, relevant, like plastic pollution issue. So we are 5 participants here, right? And if I'm not wrong, if we are not directly uh, avoiding plastic usage, so every one of our family at least consumes more than 100 plastic bags monthly. So if we become aware, we can ultimately reduce 500 plastic bags from this particular group every month. So can you just imagine how much plastic pollution we can reduce only by awareing people? And the reason I'm saying awareness and reduction is important, because the reduction is more economically viable rather than reusing or recycling. Reusing or recycling 500 bags, you can just calculate how much money it needs. It needs like 1.5 to 4 times more money to reuse rather than. So if we can just cut our ties from pollution at source, we can just overlap all these issues. So definitely it's going to that question. It's not only the government can do by themselves, it's on us as well, how well aware we are, how well educated we are, and how well unitedly we can take measures to address all environmental and climate issues. Definitely government has to cooperate, and other agencies as well.
Thank you so much, Maya. Okay, let's move on to the next question. I would like to direct this question towards Ajman. Okay, Maisha Zahir, she wrote, thoroughly enjoying the discussion and learning so much. Another question is the restriction on freedom of speech, stopping a lot of great environmentalists from speaking up against our dirty development. How could we aim to create a safer platform for activists to openly talk about issues and make impact? I think Ajman Haya will be able to answer this question more properly.
Yes. So Maisha actually raised a very big concern, a concern uh, that was raised in my mind while doing so many other courses. This is a concern that is mostly raised by youngsters nowadays, I believe, because climate change itself, as Sharaban ma'am also talked about Greta, and I keep recalling her because she has created a movement for all of us, even the ones that are, the ones that are older than her and the ones that will come after her. She has created a movement in a way that got the attention of so many politicians, so many decision makers. But at the same time, she raised a question about the which what should I say, freedom of speech, right? So as this itself is protected by our constitution, but at the same time, a particular law which is often misused to suppress the voice of many people who want to raise their voice. And I've read about the Fulbari incident and even the shipbreaking incident, where so many individuals were the voice of so many individuals were suppressed. And this, I think, is a very big issue, especially for us environmental science and management students. So how could, as she asked, how could we aim to create a safer platform for activists to openly talk about issues and make impacts? I think this has a lot to do with the political scenario of our country in the first place, and how the social structure of our country works. Sharban ma'am also mentioned about the legislative complexity, how the legislative complexity of our country also works. So I don't, me as a student, I don't think I can assure or mention any particular aspect where we can ensure a safer platform for activists. But at the same time, people like Sayyid Rizwana Hassan, people like Sarah Hussain, Dr. Kamal Hussain, who obviously have a lot of social and political backup or like protection, but at the same time, they have created a way where we can, express ourselves and our concern. And I think as long as people like them exist in a country like ours, I think there's always hope, and there's always hope for us, the youngsters, to talk against such atrocities that are taking place against environmental sustainability.
Thank you so much. I think this is a question that dwells in all of our minds as activists. Okay, moving on to the next question. Niloufar Rizwani also asked, don't you think that public should be made aware of the situation first? They have a part to play too, isn't it so? I would prefer Nabil sir to answer that for us.
Let me take a closer look at this. Okay. Yeah, I actually don't have much to add over here. I do think adding to probably the last question as well. Yeah, if the activists are having some fear of speaking up, it kind of adds to this, that public does have knowledge, but the thing about awareness is that awareness leads to action. That's where a lot of work gets put into awareness. Okay, but if you have an issue with that action, perhaps we're misallocating our resources. So again, I fully agree with that. Just a little addition to what Adil said about the last question as well. Again, it's a interesting question. I just would like to cite an example. We've been saying things about, say, coal-fired power plants. Okay, the fact that we're building so many of them. We've been talking about it for a while now. Okay, only did COVID, I would say, came as a blessing that it wiped out 16 planned power plant out of our planning scope. We were sort of planning to build 21. 16 of the right now have been shelved. Okay, so were we not talking about it before? Yeah, it's a different situation that sort of triggered this. So again, so some of my students in 409 would testify to one of the topics we discussed last week. It's a little bit about the policy window. Okay, there's always work going on. It's just that window of opportunity. You have to seize that.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, so there is another very light-hearted question, a question to Sajid Bhaiya. How do you ask the right question at the right time? By Shahriar Rahman.
Yeah, it's a pretty important question, because, for example, how do you ask the right question? So if you are a participant at COP26, I'm assuming, so being a young member, sometimes you get opportunities to ask questions to different international diplomats and policymakers in an area where you are asking one question to one individual, but that's a question to all of them. For example, Greta, what she's doing, she's very young, right? She's very young, and how what she did, she propelled the climate activism by asking questions to high-level individuals, and that had tremendous effort on the overall international climate diplomacy. So that's how each of us can ask questions to our secretaries, ministers, policymakers in different events, in locally, internationally, and can have significant impact in different policies and procedures. And before I finish my question, I have another proposal for all of us, that in COP 2016, because as we also have Sarvan Appa as a negotiator of different COPs, that how we can, this particular group and every one of us who are listening to us, how we can present that the climate literacy as a mandatory part for the primary and secondary system, because Earth Day Network, they're already advocating this initiative and inviting all the government ministers and all the governments to add to their journey. They already have signatories from India, different all other countries. So if all of you are interested, I can we can work as a Bangladesh team, and very easily we can also forward our proposal to the environment minister. Our education minister is also very dynamic and always welcomes new ideas to improve our education system, and even the prime minister, how we can unitedly connect North South University, our department, other stakeholders with Earth Day Network could be a very much good possibility.
Thank you so much, Paya. Thank you so much for answering it so well. Okay, so I think let's move on to our last question. We're really running out of time here. A question to all the panelists. How much of an impact will policies have in the next decade to curb climate change? And I would like to start with Shahraban Miss. Shahraban Miss. I think I'm pronouncing it a little different. Really sorry about that. It's almost at the end. I just noticed. I'm sorry. So, Miss, would you like to answer that? I mean,
Well,
obviously, yes, Miss.
as I mentioned,
Sorry.
like nothing much actually is happening at the international level. So at the state level, that's all we need to do. And especially from the policy context, the only solution that I can see is the energy transition. From the coal-based energy, we need to move towards all the renewable energies that is possible within Bangladesh context. And policy, by adopting effective policies, can really make a good change here. So if we really want to address climate change, mitigation is the only option. And to address the mitigation, we need to go for energy transition. From dirty fossil fuel, we need to go for clean energy. And to go for that clean energy, we need effective policies. So Bangladesh government it's a good side that is sincerely considering these issues with the help of other organizations. But energy transition through policy intervention is the key solution that I see in this regard.
Thank you, Miss. Nabil, sir, Sajid, Iqbal, Bhaiya, and Ajwan, do you guys have anything to add to that?
Yes, I would just say that Tawfiq pointed out a very interesting thing. How much of an impact would policies have? A lot, actually. If you ask my dissertation advisor, it would say it matters more than you turning off your lights and you recycling. Okay, your to him, the most important thing you can do for climate. Again, he's an American, so he's probably said it in that context, is to vote. Okay, I would also say, getting involved in the policy process. Okay, again, voting is one part; it's not everything. Is also very important. So policy, totally agree with Sharban man. Very important on that. I see that he has a follow-up question on say, or is it technological intervention more important?
Yes, sir. There is another part to this question.
Yeah, there too, energy transition. We do have this. We have to take this, technological pathway as well. So that is important. Okay, policy leads the way here. Well, your policy is actually more important. The other thing about technology is, which doesn't get highlighted, but it is now in the IPCC summary for policymakers. The thing about negative emissions sequestration. It is in the summary for the policymakers. Models are telling us that has to be part of that solution. Whether you go for a technological intervention, whether you do it naturally, it has to be. Our modeling shows that currently it needs to be put into the equation. Okay, so there too, I'm not saying that we have to adapt this. Okay, but we should. There was some other expert that I was hearing to, a Bangladeshi expert, who said we should be part of that conversation as well when it comes to some negative emission technologies, be it natural or technological.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone who would want to add to that? I guess not. This was supposed to be the last question, but there is this another question that I can't help but address by Kainat Karim C. Can NSU take the initiative to hashtag make climate class for 1 hour and for every department? Also a follow-up class to ask questions and to come up with solutions. I believe many of us are not really aware of what climate change is and how disastrous it can be, especially to a country like Bangladesh, which might submerge anytime soon. We, the citizens or the government, there is no good in blaming the government for every single issue. So what do you all have to say to that? Anyone willing to take the lead? Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, so I think Kainat Karim raised a very important concern, which is that not many of the other disciplines of NSU and other universities of undergraduate studies do not have that much importance on climate governance or environmental science or environmental management. I can say that because I passed 1 year in the Department of Business Administration, and before coming to this department, I had a very vague idea about climate change and other environmental issues, and especially before even having taken the environmental science course. So that is why I believe that it's very important that NSU and other universities provide a very interdisciplinary curriculum where environmental science and climate governance or climate science is integrated. Even in our department as well, we the environmental management majors, we do not have climate change as a course, as a core course, and I think that shows a very accurate loophole that I wanted to bring up, because both environmental science and management students need to understand climate science and how climate governance works, but that is not mandatory for all of us, and that shows how we need to make a seismic shift of our educational system or the discipline of even NSU. And also what she mentioned about we the citizens are the government, and there is no good in blaming the government for every single issue. That's itself is very important, but at the same time, we should also be given the platform to blame the government or the authority to because none of us are perfect. not the government, neither the government nor the citizens are perfect. So I think not blaming. I think we should be given a platform to give very constructive criticism, or at least criticize the government or the authority, because that brings up a lot of good, debate or issues that needs to be discussed.
Okay, thank you, Bhaiya. Does anyone have to add to the importance of introducing climate change and the concept of climate change in the other departments, or making them aware of the problem? How important we would end this webinar session with understanding the importance. Does any one of you have anything to say? I mean, add to that? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for cooperating with me. Okay, I think this brings us to the very end of this webinar. It has been a very interactive session, and thank you so much, Bard University, for arranging this. It has been definitely very helpful to raise awareness. And thank you so much to all the panelists, to Shahrukh Zaman, to Sajid Bhaiya, Nabil sir, and of course, Ajman Bhaiya. Thank you so much for cooperating and making time for this session. It has been an honor to have you all in the same screen. Thank you.
Thanks to you as well, the moderator.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much thank you so much to the viewers as well. So I think this brings us to the end of the webinar, and here we will stop broadcasting. Thank you. Good night.